Duran Premium Cigars, one of the fastest growing boutique cigar companies, providing smokers a portal into the old Cuban tradition of perfect balance and the lost art of progressive flavor construction. Roberto Pelayo Duran began his career in tobacco over 2 decades ago in Havana, where his reputation grew within Cuban circles. The creation of Duran Premium Cigars has given Roberto the platform to introduce a series of cigars that offer the same quality, construction, and detail which he perfected while in Cuba. Brands include the ultra-premium Roberto P. Duran Premium Cigar Series, Azan Cigars, Nea, and Baracoa. Duran Cigars uses a seed-to-humidor approach, as all tobacco is grown on their farms and rolled in their factory in Esteli, Nicaragua. Rollers have been carefully chosen to carry out Roberto's precise method to ensure progressive flavor in each cigar. Duran Cigars invites you to make their premium your standard.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 262, volume 2 of Stogie Geeks.
Deuce.
I am your host, Joe Hozempa, joined by Joe D. How you doing?
Great segment, man.
That was a good segment.
Yeah.
If you're just tuning in, you missed a great interview with Enrique Cejas of Matilda Cigars. So all you have to do is log on to stogiegeeks.com. You can click on our Facebook or YouTube channel, subscribe to that, like it, follow us, and you can leave your comments there for sure. It was a good interview, very good insight.
Very informative.
You know, as to that, and I passed the test in regards to what was sized for what. I'm excited.
Yep.
Wow, I might know a little bit about this cigar thing. All right, I'm excited about that. This is episode 262, Stogie Geek segment. Before we get to our sticks of the week, which is the next segment, I want to take the time out to talk to you about differences between bourbon, Tennessee whiskey, and rye whiskey. If you follow Stogie Geeks on a weekly basis, Paul, our leader, had said that he had wanted to start to dabble into this. So
right.
I've done a little bit of research to fulfill the obligation there. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, we'll take some time out to talk about wine. I full disclaimer.
Legit wine connoisseur.
I love wine and cigars. I think they are two lost arts for sure.
Yep.
You know, but a lot of Stogie Geeks listeners and a lot of cigar smokers really tend to do the Scotch or bourbon thing or whiskey with the cigar. There's a place for it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, but I want to talk about specifically the differences, so you're kind of a little bit into the know, and also to begin a dialogue, because I really think that if you listen to the Stogie Geek show and you enjoy cigars, this conversation comes up, you know. And for me personally, the reason why I picked this topic today is because it came up 3 times last week. You know, people say, well, what do you pair with cigars? Or this happened yesterday, actually. I was at a cigar shop, and one of my clients from my business outside of Stogie Geeks walked in and, you know, introduced blah, 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 and then said, hey, Joe, so-and-so has a question. And the question was, I'm smoking this, and when I have it with coffee, it's awesome.
Yep.
And when I have it with, and he was drinking bourbon, it totally wipes out the cigar. I said, well, problem number 1 is you're smoking that, right? You know what I mean? Because, you know, we all know that my reputation precedes me, right? But I said, you know, I said, because of the makeup of that cigar with the wrapper binder filler, and I'm not going to get into what they were smoking and all of that stuff, but because of what you're smoking, the coffee is meant to complement that. And he says, well, okay, well, there are times that I really want to have rye. They've been getting into the rye. They've been liking the craft beer and the ryes and stuff like that. And I'm looking for a cigar to match with this. And I said, okay. So I grabbed the cigar tender and said, for his next smoke, have him try 1, 2, or 3. So about 2 hours later,
Yep.
kid comes back in the room and he's like, it's amazing.
Tailor-made, yeah.
And I said, well, I'm going to take some time out to talk about that here on the Stogie Geeks show. That being said, I decided to, because bourbon, rye, and Tennessee whiskey, to a person who just enjoys either bourbon or scotch with a cigar,
Right.
would probably, I'm using the word probably, lump those three into one. Pretty simple mistake,
fair. Yeah.
right? Pretty simple, I'm having a rye whiskey or I'm having a Tennessee whiskey. So therefore, I'm just having whiskey, right?
Yep.
And I'm not going to get into brands. I can, but it would be more, what does Joe like to drink,
Right.
So that being said, after this segment, email me, joeh@stogiegeeks.com, and we can have some conversation on that
Keep it going.
as to, we can keep the conversation going. Or for the producer's note, if they want to comment on our Facebook there, you just go to stogiegeeks.com, click on the Facebook icon, or go into Facebook, type in Stogie Geeks. And, if you want to start to give some brand names, because what I'm noticing is now some of the dialogue that we're having with some of the listeners is now we're having some great offline conversations about specific brands.
Right.
About specific brands of, I like this cigar X with this bourbon or this scotch or whichever. So without further ado, you drink bourbon, I'm sure?
I drink it all.
Have you had some, Joe?
Yeah. For me, that's half the fun, kind of mixing and matching and, being a mad scientist there with various cigars, time of day, strength component, and whatever you're drinking, and see what works. But if you're educated, I'm looking forward to the segment. Get educated as well. What kind of general direction should I be going into? I maybe already have a preconceived notion of what I want to drink and smoke, and then see if it works. But if different things play better, why not?
Yeah. Well, for the topic here on the Stogie Geeks, we're going to talk about taste, how it's made. So they're all made differently.
Yep.
Okay. Where it's made. Okay. Region, because Stogie Geek show. So region is important.
Certainly.
What it's made with, and popular cocktails that you can mix with each of the three.
Yep.
So, without further ado, which one would you like to discuss first, Joe?
Let's go with the rye.
Rye. Okay. So, we're going to go rye, Tennessee whiskey, bourbon. Grab a pen or pencil. Rye, Tennessee whiskey, bourbon. Ready? Make a chop. It's going to be awesome. Taste. Rye whiskey is spicy and light. Pretty simple.
Yep.
And I would add that it does have a non-ABV aftertaste of alcohol.
Right.
Fair enough?
Yep.
With the rye? So it's spicy and light. The Tennessee whiskey has charcoal. Tell them from Rhode Island, right? Charcoal, right? Has charcoal taste, and it's sweeter. Okay? And the bourbon has characteristics of sweet wood, vanilla, and caramel. So, obviously, if we're tasting this and if you were doing a blind taste test and something was lighter and spicy, you would say, okay, and it did have that aftertaste, which if you're not getting it on your palate, you maybe have some water or switch up your palate or try it fresh if you're into that.
Yep.
But you generally can really detect rye, for sure.
Yep.
And if you were having something that really has charcoal taste into it because of how it's made, which we'll get to, that is Tennessee whiskey, right? And bourbon, again, if it's complex, which we can all name complex bourbons, they're straight bourbon. You're going to have characteristics of sweet wood, vanilla, and caramel.
More partial to you personally, straight up, going old school straight up, or you throw a cube in there to kind of bring out some of those flavors and let it pop a little bit?
Well, with me personally, it's mood.
Yeah.
It's mood. So, sometimes you want something cold. However, I have been at some cigar tastings and cigar bourbon tastings.
Yep.
Believe it or not, if you take a straw, right? You know how you can say you take a glass of water and you just take a straw and you can go like that and put your finger over it and you have like a little bit of water in the straw.
Yep.
And you just put just a splash of water in it.
That's all you need right there.
It opens it up. It's amazing, right? It's amazing process. And that was actually taught to me when I was doing a cigar promo back in my cigar rep days.
Yep.
There and we had paired the cigar that I was repping at the time with a bourbon and a scotch. And you know, and they were like, well, do you want a cube or neat, or do you want a dab of water? And my question was, well, what's the deal with that with the dab of water? You know, because I've only had it at the time neat in there. And again, it's that exploratory phase.
Right.
You know, that being said, it would depend on my mood. Because sometimes I want something cold, you know, and other times neat. Right now, I am doing whiskey neat, and I'm doing coffee. I'm digging the push-pull whiskey-coffee combo here on Stogie Geeks.
I'm noticing that, yeah.
You know, it's been the past couple of weeks.
Also, if you're going to, you're going to nurse it over the course of an hour, you're going to lose that entire cube in there. But I kind of like that experimental, just, squirt your water in there just enough to bring it out.
Well, I mean, you got to look at it this way. Whether you think so or not, and not to get geeky about it, but this is a Stogie Geek show. It's all a journey.
Right.
And ultimately, it's all about what you like. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm assuming that this happens to you all the time. What do you like to smoke besides what you rep? But what do you like to smoke? Or, what is the best stick that you've smoked on the Stogie Geek show? You can't. Depends on my mood.
Actually, you know what? The drink pairing question is popping up. It's more prevalent now. Mm-hmm. That's now that you mention it, that seems to arise even more so now.
Yeah.
The drink pairing and I generally wouldn't stop mixing and matching and going mad scientist with the beverages unless it's a cigar that I already know what I should be extracting from. You know? And you certainly don't want to pair, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but pair that new alcohol pairing with the cigar you're trying for the first time, because you're probably not have to get the full honest read from it.
Yeah, for sure. Behind the scenes note. Lucky for Joe H and Joe D, we have a full bar.
Yeah, we do.
Here on Stogie Geeks. Unlucky for the Joes is I am missing one of Paul Azadorian's old fashions. Because let me tell you something. I first became co-host on the show January 2nd of 17. And since January 2nd, 17, probably like January 20 change, right?
Yep.
After having 3 old fashions in a row. Not on the same, well, probably on the same episode, but, after that, I go to a restaurant and I'm like, they just don't make them like Paul.
Always. I use Paul's Old Fashioned as a measuring stick at all times, and most that I've sampled, I always reach out for the Old Fashioned, and it's just not cut the mustard.
And what drives me crazy is when I go into a cigar bar, lounge, whatever you want to call it, and I say Old Fashioned. And I can tell before they even nope, it's not going to come out right. Because I will tell you that here on the Stogie Geek show, if we have a show that starts at 2, it's 1:33 and Paul's beginning the construction of the Manhattans. I'm sorry, of the Old Fashions.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's talking, he's doing his thing. And
attention to details on Paul, for sure.
So note to self for the production crew, if we could have some Old Fashions delivered for next episode.
Yes.
Maybe Paul can make them. That'd be great. Put them in the freezer. I don't know. There you go. All right.
Nice.
Okay. Since we're going rye, Tennessee whiskey, and bourbon, how it's made. The rye is put into barrels with no more than 62.5% ABV and must be bottled between 40 and 80% of that ABV. Now, I have brewed my own stuff.
Yep.
There's a whole device you can use to find out the ABV and the alcohol content from there. It's called checking the gravity. Have you ever done this?
No, but I just watched the Moonshiner show.
So it's like it floats.
Yeah,
it floats, and then you kind of you dip it in, and you kind of spin it, and then it bobbles, and it tells you, and there you go. It's like the old school thermometers. It's not like you can stick it on your forehead and bing, your temperature's normal, go home. You know what I mean? It's this is it's a craft.
It's not fun.
So it gets bottled between 40 and 80% of that ABV, and it's aged for at least 2 years, and it's charred in oak barrels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what gives it that aftertaste component that you would expect in rye. Okay, Tennessee whiskey must be charcoal filtered, not charcoal, right? Charcoal filtered in the Lincoln County process. Now, future note, we're gonna take some time as we go through this series and talk specifically about the Lincoln County process, because it's different than any of the other processes there. But for the sake of this segment, right? So it must be charcoal filtered in the Lincoln County process, aged in charred oak barrels, okay, for at least 2 years. But it must be at least 40% of the ABV. So there's a component there between the 40 and 80. And when it is, but they still must age for 2 years. So even when you're talking non-cigars that have an aging process,
right,
your spirits that you consume have an aging process as well. That would be the charcoal filtered for the Tennessee whiskey. For the bourbon, it's aged in charred new oak barrels for at least 2 years, and then put into barrels no more than 62% of the ABV, but must be bottled between 40 and 80. That's for the straight bourbon.
Yep.
And so, obviously, one's charcoal filtered. You're going to get that charcoal and sweet taste. Other one's spicy and light. The light component comes from the ABV and the methodology of putting it in there. But they're all aged for at least 2 years. Now, you get into marketing, and I know some emails are going to come up and say, Joe, this has been aged 5 years, 6 years, but that's like the bare minimum in order to produce X of what it is that they're trying to consume.
Industry standard, about 2 years.
Yep, industry standard, about 2 years. Okay. There you go. They're all made here, originally, in the great old US of A, with the exception of, obviously, Tennessee whiskey, which, for those of you scoring at home, it's going to be branded... Where? You only got one shot you only got one shot for this, Joe D. You only got one shot. Where specifically is Tennessee whiskey made under the Lincoln County process?
Not Tennessee?
No, give it to me. What is it?
I have no idea. I'm pretty thirsty, though.
One guess. In the U.S.
Pennsylvania?
God, it's Tennessee, Joe. Tennessee.
I threw that out there. I figured it was a trick question.
It's Tennessee,
all
right? It's Tennessee. That's Tennessee whiskey, right? Don't you listen to country song?
No, not at all.
No? Well, that's strike one.
Not my jam.
That's strike one. So it's there. So all kidding aside, I wasn't putting you on the spot, but I was putting you on the spot, right? It's Tennessee whiskey.
The lamps are pretty hot right now.
Right?
Yeah.
If it was called, like here, newsflash, right? We have a Connecticut wrapper. What state would a Connecticut wrapper come from? Mass-produced Connecticut wrappers. We're not getting product specific here. Joe, redeem yourself. Where do Connecticut wrappers come from?
Connecticut.
Boom. I like it. Right? There you go. See? You ever won.
You gotta check the tape. I did throw out Tennessee. Shot me down. I figured it was a trick question.
You look at, there wasn't a trick question. I'm not here playing stump anybody, right?
Yep.
What's it made with? Okay. The rye is made, at least 51% of the rye is made from the rest. I'm sorry, let me start all over. Rye whiskey, say that 10 times, is made at least 51% rye, and the rest is a mix from corn and barley. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could see a natural, if you're into craft beers, you can see where this discussion could tailor into other stuff as well.
Yep.
Because, as a craft beer enthusiast, as much as I like cigars, I love spirits and wine. If I were to put them in order, wine, craft beer, spirits, right?
Yep.
just for me. Having that being said, but it's got corn and barley. Tennessee whiskey, at least 51%. It comes from the corn, and the rest from a mix of, you ready for this? Rye, barley, and wheat. So they kind of intertangle. Process starts the same. The AVB got to be the same or within the same ratio, but they're going to do X with this, and it's going to go on a different path, and that's what determines what the difference is. Also, now in the bourbon, at least 51% from corn, and the rest is a mix of rye, barley, and wheat. So when you're looking at the difference between a bourbon and Tennessee whiskey, it's not only that Lincoln County process, but it's charcoal, right? That being said, so popular cocktails to have, right? With the rye, very popular cocktail, got a Manhattan, right? I like Manhattans, old school.
Yep.
Right? I used to have a neighbor, right, who was much older than I was. And on Friday when I came home from work, he's like, "It's Manhattan time." And let me tell you something. If you're looking for something with pop, Manhattan's the way to go.
School down the Manhattans.
If you're looking for something with a lot of pop to it, get yourself a Manhattan. A popular for Tennessee whiskey is Lynchburg lemonade, no question.
Yep.
And the infamous Jack and Coke.
Yeah.
Not Jack and Pepsi. Now, you've had Jack and Pepsi at some places, right? You ever go to a restaurant and say, "Can I have a Jack and Coke?" And you take a sip and you're like, "Ugh."
Oh, the Jack and Coke, not my jam.
Yeah, it's not your jam?
Not at all.
No. Yeah, Jack and Coke is my jam. It's not my jam for cigars. Right. But Jack and Coke, I like the Jack and Coke.
Especially on that weight loss tip. That's popular. My brother lives on them.
Yep. And for bourbon, you have a bunch of different options there. You can go old fashioned, which did I mention I miss Paul Asadorian's old fashions?
I think so, once, twice, yeah.
Okay, I'm just saying. You know what we'd do for a Stogie Geek episode of a pork tenderloin.
Oh.
And a Paul Asadorian old fashioned.
Oh man!
Next week on Stogie Geeks, we talk more again about Joe's favorite stick and Paul's humidor. Right? So you have the old fashioned. Non-cigars for me is your classic mint julep. Mm-hmm. Right? If you want to theme it up, mint juleps are
little horse racing.
Are there? Yep. I would be the rowdy guy at a horse race. Drinking the Jack and Coke. You know what I mean? Come on, Sugarfoot. Come on, right? Or whatever the horse's name is, right? And then, again, whiskey sour. But, again, I'm not making these recommendations to pair with cigars. I would definitely the old-fashioned mint julep, whiskey sour. Yep. It reminds me of how we began this conversation with the gentleman who said, when I have this on my palate, it wipes out. I think those are the mint julep, the whiskey sour, the Lynchburg lemonade would probably take away from the cigar. I'm not saying it wouldn't complement it. I'm not saying you couldn't go on a journey to enjoy it together. But, when it comes to cigars and pairing spirits, I think you got to be as straightforward in what it is as possible. And I think that the Manhattan simple Jack and Coke or some, vodka tonic, something simple there. And then obviously your classic old fashioned. Any questions?
I'm taking it all in.
If you have any questions, joeh@stogiegeeks.com. Let me know. If I've missed anything and you want to add on to it, let me know. Email us. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about the sticks of the week. Stay tuned.